Hi, I'm Nancy Chanteau, and this is Thought Cleanse video 5.5, and it's about trauma memories. And I'm making this video because one of the kinds of thoughts that can loop turns out to be trauma thoughts that are really based on trauma memories. And these thoughts operate a little bit differently than our normal cognitive neocortical thinking processes. These thoughts come from the limbic brain, and they're stored there based on intensity. They're stored there based on an event having a strong emotional or physical pain or sensation, some sort of very intense experience. And, obviously it wouldn't be pleasure or joy. It would be based on pain or fear, so that, it was helping us avoid danger. That's the reason, and the makeup of the system is that it's designed to help us identify situations that pose danger. Unfortunately, with trauma, we're dealing with something that event was super significant and may or may not be something that could happen again. If it's something that could happen again, even if we desensitize it, why we would want to desensitize a trauma memory is that we want to have maximum available resources in the moment to help us respond to what's happening right now. And the trauma memory kind of it can be so powerful that it can take us away from our ability to respond in the present moment, because it's almost like the trauma experience is happening again. The recall is so powerful. People will report trauma memories being like inside of a 3D full sound, full experience movie that's just playing in their heads. And when we have situations where there's just recurring trauma over and over and over again, that's where you get post-traumatic stress disorder, things like that, where somebody is being haunted by their repetitive trauma memories and they can't really get them to stop. You can't think your way out of a trauma memory. So what we need to do is we need to desensitize that memory. And when somebody's had a lot of traumatic experiences, it can seem overwhelming to have to desensitize every single one. Gratefully and luckily, we only have to, my recommendation is only desensitize something when it comes up. So if a memory is a problem for you, it comes up all the time, you might want to just get in there and get ahead of the recurrence of the trigger and just desensitize that memory. But otherwise, you can wait until something comes up and then desensitize it. But what you want to do is you want to desensitize it so that you have your current response available to you, and also so that the trauma memory isn't so overwhelming. Most of the time, our traumas happen when we have less power, less knowledge, less wisdom, less awareness, and our increased power would help us have a different response. We are less able to have that different response because we're so, our experience is so occupied with that memory. So in order to desensitize a memory, you need to do something that's intense. So you might need to, jumping jacks is a great example of something that's totally intense, and it would totally work to desensitize the memory, but it's not the kind of thing you want to maybe do in public. So if you're having a trauma memory in a cafe, all of a sudden you bust out the jumping jacks. It doesn't work very well. What I found is that there's a couple of different interventions that really help people in public. One, I learned from Stacey Haynes in her Somatics and Trauma course. If you take a deep breath and inhale, and you hold your breath at the top of the breath, and then you squeeze every single muscle really tight and hold everything until you need to let your breath go, then release all the muscles. That is a really effective intervention, and you can do it almost anywhere. So if I was to do it without kind of changing my face, I might do something like this. And then when I needed to breathe, I would let go of everything. It's not a very, you would notice it if you were paying attention to me. What is Nancy doing? But if you weren't really paying attention to me, I was standing in line in the grocery store or something like that, I wouldn't even notice that I was doing it. So what you do is you just squeeze every single muscle as tight as you can, with the exception of maybe your face. If you're not with somebody, you can squeeze your face as well. So it's squeezing every muscle in your jaw, clenching your jaw. Another thing I've used with clients that has worked pretty successfully is to use a hot liquid or an ice cold liquid I had a client who was going to have a conversation that she knew was typically triggering for her, and she used both. She got hot tea and an ice cold drink, and when she was identifying a moment in the conversation where she was afraid she was starting to lose her ability to be present, she would drink one or the other of the liquids. And she said she switched back and forth. The intensity of the switch actually helped her as well. We're just looking for something that is intense to help rewrite the limbic memory. And when I say limbic memory, we know that the limbic memory is where the trauma memory is stored based on, I learned this in Matt Johnson's book, Mind Wide Open. In the memory chapter, he talks about rat studies where when they had a traumatized rat, if they disconnected the limbic brain, the rat stopped acting traumatized. So we know that that part of the brain is where these memories are stored. And we know that this is how these memories are written, that intensity writes these memories. So once you know that, then you can do something intense. And what happens is instead of storing the memory and then storing the new intensity experience, it actually just rewrites it. And another element that's really important is that you want to bring in your wise adult consciousness, as we've been practicing, locating yourself in your wise adult consciousness as an embodied state in your body, as something that is located in sensation. You bring your attention there, and then you remind yourself that as you're doing this intervention, this intense, whatever this physically, emotionally intense intervention is, as you're doing it, you're holding yourself. You're holding the space for yourself. You're holding the container of yourself, and you're reminding yourself that you're doing this to heal. That helps you have this extra layer of consciousness and spaciousness on the experience. And I think it really makes a huge difference in both overriding the trauma memories and also creating a stronger wise adult consciousness and relationship with the trauma memories. Once the memory gets faded out enough, you're going to want to stop the thoughts again. So you go back to your thought gesture, whatever it is. If it's psst, you go back to that. If you're brushing it off your head, whatever your gesture or thought is, you go back to stopping your thoughts once the trauma memory is faded. In some situations, a trauma memory is matched up with a plan that needs to be made, or there's a cosmological belief that needs to be rewired, and we'll continue to talk about those things through the curriculum to help you identify what you need to do with each of the elements in order to get the thought to stop altogether. Ideally, we get to this place where we're not having thoughts that we don't want. And underneath that, we can even get to the beginning of the thought so the thought doesn't start. And we end up with this wide open, present consciousness that you notice the world, but you're pretty much thought free unless there's a light thought. Okay, I hope this helps.